What's up YouTube, Chris from Review Cave here, and today I feel like starting a brand new What If series for the channel. What brought this about was, well, after finishing Avengers Endgame for like the second time, something popped into my mind of what if Ben 10 was in the MCU, like how that could end up changing like the majority of the films involving like the Avengers and the world as a whole. Now I know this kind of sounds like, well, kind of stupid. But it was a fun thing that's been in the back of my mind for a while now, and I figured might as well talk about it. It might be like this video could end up being a few episodes, maybe 3 to 4 parts, depending on how far along I can get with this one. I'm gonna try and keep it under 20 minutes because I do have a tendency to ramble on a bit. But I promise I'll put the important parts inside this single video. So let's get started with where I think Ben could end up get his powers in the MCU. Now we all know that Ben gets his powers from the Omnitrix after it crashes to Earth and Ben finds it and it attaches itself to his wrist. I figured the perfect opportunity would for Ben to get the Omnitrix would have to be after the events of the first Avengers movie. Now, I've been playing around with this and I was thinking either Ben gets the Omnitrix right at the end of the Battle of New York where the Jari's ship was destroyed and maybe it was part of the cargo. But I figured it wouldn't be as interesting. So I ended up just going with Ben's off at summer camp. It's not summer camp. He's off on a summer road trip with his cousin Gwen and Grandpa Max, and he ends up finding the Omnitrix crash landing in the middle of the woods, and that would kind of go along the same lengths as the original in the cartoon. But one thing I'm going to change is how Ben ended up thinking that wanting to be a hero. He was in the Battle of New York. He saw the Avengers fight off the Chitauri and wanted to know if he could be just like them. If he got some sort of cool superpower or some piece of tech that could help him help people, maybe he could be an Avenger one day. And his dream came true when the Omnitrix fell. Now, I'm going to have to give a little background for what would happen for Ben from that point on towards the next Avengers movie, because he will be participating in Avengers movies at some point. So I feel like first off, we're gonna have to introduce Vilgax very early on, which you can't have Ben 10 without Vilgax. So starting off, Vilgax will actually be injured after trying to get the Omnitrix. So here's what's going to happen. Vilgax, after sending a bunch of alien robots to try and get the Omnitrix and failing, attempts to give his technology to some of the humans and manipulate them as pawns to try and get the Omnitrix for him. Because he figures that if a human tries to talk to another human, it'll be easier to get the Omnitrix, maybe to fool them or something. So he manipulates the likes of Dr. Animo, some Bozo and the Circus Freaks, as well as Hex. But Hex doesn't use any tech. Vilgax just lies to him and says that he can give him some kind of magic text or something that can help him rule the world or whatever. And they all fail, not surprisingly. And the last part would end up having to be Ben taking on 6-6 and his gang of bounty hunters. Now, Ben still makes his Tetraman friend, and they end up beating down the bounty hunters and driving them back. And Ben learns about the Omnitrix, same as normal. Now, Ben, he has all 10 aliens. Everything goes along swimmingly. At some point, he's going to end up meeting Kevin Levin, and he starts to kind of learn the true meaning of being a hero. Now, I'm going to give one quick piece of detail. The Animo, Zombozo, Hex, and the Bounty Hunters would have to be in a single movie just to depict Ben learning how to use aliens and everything. And honestly, yeah, pretty much that. And learning how to fight as well, and being a good hero. The second movie I feel like I would focus it more on Ben and Kevin, as well as Gwen. three of them having some kind of friendship, and then Kevin starting to get drunk with power by trying to absorb the Omnitrix's aliens one by one. And it all caps off with Kevin turning into that huge amalgamation of all of Ben's current aliens and then beating down Ben. Now, as Ben is trying to run away in order to figure out a way to take down someone who has the powers of all of his aliens, he accidentally unlocks Cannonbolt and is able to, after figuring out how he works, knocks down Kevin. Now, the events of these two movies take place in different years, 2013 and 2014 respectively. 2012 and 2013. Sorry, my mistake. I did a typo there. 2012, it'll happen in the summer right after the events of the first Avengers movie, and 2013 will happen the year right after, giving Ben time to fully master the 10 aliens he currently has and mature more as a young hero. But Kevin being Kevin and kind of manipulating Ben a bit, it's kind of understandable. He's still a kid. He can't expect himself to be like not vulnerable to some kind of manipulation or tricks. But yeah, Kevin will be the main threat of the movie, but we will throw in like stuff like the Forever Knights as like fodder villains to come in at some later point if I feel like it would partake to the story at any moment. But yeah, after that, Vilgax will appear as the big bad for the third installment of Ben 10, where Vilgax comes to Earth fully healed with the same way he looks like in the first season. Now Ben's doing his thing. He's doing his usual hero thing. And at this point, I feel like he would have unlocked Wildvine purely by chance. And yeah, he's got 12 aliens to work with. He's pretty much mastered all of them since he had a year to work with. He had 2 years to work with his original 10, and a whole year with Cannonbolt, and just a few days, maybe months, with Wildvine to get the hang of everything. So he knows the strengths and weaknesses of all of them. He's developed his own pretty unique fighting style, so he won't get overpowered by a bunch of his enemies. Then Vilgax shows up, tries to tire him out using his barrage of robots. But Ben, using Heat Blast and knowing all of Heat Blast's abilities at this point, like fire absorption, being able to fly through the air, he takes down them relatively easily. Since Ben had years of experience with Heat Blast, he could not take down all of Vilgax's robots at this point with no trouble whatsoever. But then Vilgax shows up and proceeds to beat Ben to the ground. And Ben, he was somewhat exhausted by taking down a bunch of those robots, but he still had to fight Vilgax, who was at full strength at the time of their fight. Ben does manage to get a few good hits in, and maybe burn Vilgax a little bit, but Vilgax ultimately overpowers him, and the fight goes on a bit too long, and the Omnitrix ends up timing out, leaving Ben defenseless. Vilgax feels insulted that a child was able to get the best of him for the past 2.5 years. At this point, Ben is roughly 13 years old. So, yeah, he's 13 years old at this point, because this is like 2015 before Age of Ultron, and right after the Winter Soldier and the Fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. So what happens is that Vilgax decides to try and take Ben back to his ship to try and remove the Omnitrix, as per normal. Grandpa Max and Gwen show up to try and take down Vilgax, and that relatively fails, so Grandpa Max ends up grabbing Ben into the RV, and they end up running away as fast as humanly possible. Now, one thing I want to be sure of this is that I know I kind of skipped over like the fights for like the first Ben movie with like Dr. Animo, Zombozo, and the Circus Freaks along with Hex, but I don't want to get too into that because that won't affect the MCU timeline like relatively as much. I mean, sure, we get introduced to magic like way earlier than we do in the MCU, but that's just isolated to Ben, and we don't get to Doctor Strange just yet. I can give Hex his own backstory at some point, but for now, I'm just going to focus on the Ben stuff. Gwen knows magic at this point, at least a bit of magic at this point, so she can hold her own. And we do get the whole Lucky Girl persona as well. So at this point, Grandpa Max and Gwen are getting away with Ben in the RV to run away from Vilgax, while Grandpa Max tells his backstory of how he was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, you know, I didn't say plumber because plumbers don't exist in this universe, and we have S.H.I.E.L.D. instead that work on extraterrestrial and supernatural things and secret intelligence. I figured it would work out better. So Grandpa Max was a former agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. back in the 80s, I believe. He retired in like the early 90s, late 80s. But he was a high-ranking member of S.H.I.E.L.D. and one of their best. He even trained Nick Fury, who was the current director of S.H.I.E.L.D., but Grandpa Max ended up having his own unit where Nick Fury trained with him at Mount Rushmore in a covert base that not everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. knew about, only select few agents that Max trusted. And it had a bunch of alien artifacts, as well as some high-grade tech that was too dangerous, well, deemed too dangerous for anyone to have, even for S.H.I.E.L.D. And Nick kind of agreed to, his mentor's wishes to keep all that locked up for good. So they make a beeline for Mount Rushmore to try and get whatever weaponry they can to help take down Vilgax as the Omnitrix is recharging. But as they're getting away, Vilgax catches up to them, knocks the RV to the side, it crashes. It's not completely destroyed, but it's enough of an impact to knock out Grandpa Max and Gwen, and Vilgax ends up reaching into the RV and grabbing Ben and taking him back to his ship. Now, Grandpa Max and Gwen, who come to a few minutes later, end up going straight to Mount Rushmore, prepared to try and go rescue Ben. As this is going on, Vilgax is still trying to remove the Omnitrix from Ben, and he's getting nowhere as the Omnitrix is starting to give off a huge force field feedback, as it has fail-safes to keep the owners from getting the Omnitrix removed forcefully, which Vilgax most likely did not know of, and neither did Ben. But then Grandpa Max and Gwen barge into Vilgax's ship as usual, and proceed to distract Vilgax as Gwen uses her magic to break Ben free. But when she does, the Omnitrix, after whatever Vilgax did to it, starts having Ben shift between aliens relatively quickly. And so, yeah, that all goes down. Ben shifting between aliens at random, and has no idea what he's going to turn into next. But the second Ben turns into forearms, he makes a mad dash to Vilgax to knock him out of the plane, knock him out of the ship with him, and they fall onto Mount Rushmore. As that happens, someone in the distance sees this and starts making a beeline for Rushmore. Now, Ben is currently trying to hold his own against Vilgax. The only thing that makes Ben relatively more capable of taking down Vilgax as he randomly shifts between aliens is the fact that he's had roughly 3 years of experience with basically the majority of his aliens. So he's able to adapt very quickly and is able to get one over on Vilgax for the majority of the fight. Vilgax, still being insanely overpowered, still finds a way to knock Ben down a couple of times. But Ben, not knowing the full power of Vilgax, doesn't know which alien would actually deal the finishing blow, and given enough to knock Vilgax out and have him get captured and maybe possibly locked up by the government, or maybe Grandpa Max has some kind of secret prison in Mount Rushmore to place Vilgax in. But then Vilgax gets another good hit in as Ben tries to take him down with Diamond Head and slams him right to the ground beneath Mount Rushmore. Right when Vilgax lands to try and take down Ben, the Omnitrix finally times out. Now it's timed out, and Vilgax is about to deal a finishing blow, because at this point, he's like, it's going to be easier to take it off of him if he's dead. But right before he attempts to, pound him to death, he ends up getting hit in the head with a red, white, and blue shield. That's right, Captain America shows up to save Ben at the last second. You might be asking why Captain America is there. Now, I should have said this at the beginning of the video. This is going to take a lot of suspension of disbelief. Like, make things so nearly impossible or just really crazy, and try and make them work. So I feel like after the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D., Cap would be going around trying to take down whatever remnants of Hydra there are, and possibly reclaim any SHIELD bases that have been inoperable for years in an attempt to either turn it into a new Avengers facility or to help get SHIELD up and running again. As he gets to the Rushmore base that he's told to go to by Nick Fury, who was the only other person aside from Max Tennyson, his mentor, about his existence and all of the weapons and files that are backed up over there since the 80s. And, Cap is the person that saw Mount Rushmore being cracked, and he rushes over there. And as he goes there, he sees Vilgax about to finish off Ben, and he decides to help him out. Now, Captain America, he's a lot stronger than a lot of people give him credit for. Not to mention he's a tactical genius. So I figured he'd be able to hold his own against Vilgax for a little while, one-on-one. Then Gwen and Grandpa Max show up to assist Cap in, taking down Vilgax. Now, as this is going on, Ben is trying to figure out a way to help, since he's not really as strong or as fast as he is in some of his alien forms, and he realizes it's something that he probably should have worked on in case of this very situation. He's been focusing way too much on mastering his alien forms that he hasn't focused too much on his own body. But at that very minute, the Omnitrix ends up, being recharged after it being timed out for a long while at this point. He unlocks a new alien as he tries to turn into forearms to give everyone a hand. Now this is the point where I kind of didn't know which alien to give him, because as much as I wanted him to turn into forearms and help pummel Vilgax into the ground, I feel like giving him a new alien to master would honestly be a lot more interesting, and let's face it, if Ben gets new alien almost every single movie, it would be amazing. Or off screen, it could be either or. And I've kind of juggled back and forth between which alien it could be, but in the end, I figured it'd be a lot of fun if it was, Feedback. Feedback is one of my favorite Benton aliens, and it became canonized from Omniverse, and it hasn't really been in the first season or mentioned in Alien Force or Ultimate Alien. But I liked the guy so much, I decided might as well make him one of Ben's aliens in this new timeline. So Ben turns into Feedback, and as you guessed, he uses his energy manipulation, his energy blasts to basically take down Vilgax. Now, Vilgax tries to take down Ben by grabbing him as Feedback with one big lunge and bringing him back to his ship. Little does he know that Max ended up setting it to self-destruct and to leave the atmosphere right before he came to help out Ben. Now, Ben, as he's struggling, manages to use whatever residual energy in Vilgax's ship for one last blast to incapacitate Vilgax, as he ended up escaping the ship. Lucky for him, he was still relatively close to the ground where it wouldn't injure him too badly. And with that, Vilgax's ship goes straight up into the atmosphere and explodes, and no more Vilgax. Now, after this point, the Omnitrix finally times out, and Ben ends up meeting one of his favorite heroes, Captain America's main inspiration for becoming a hero. Now, Cap, he's confused about how Ben's able to transform like that, but he also commends him for his bravery and heroism. But he says to kind of leave everything to him in the Avengers, because he's still too young and he's still got other stuff to look forward to in his life, and he doesn't have to go through life of being a hero. And Ben does agree, but he's not going to stop being a hero. He's still a teenager, but he's grown a lot. Cap leaves, and everything seems pretty well. Kappa Max ends up giving Ben a nice big hug because he's glad that he didn't die at the hands of Vilgax, one of the galaxy's biggest warlords. Now, at this point, not much is going to happen. Ben's still going to do his hero thing on his own with Max and Gwen, obviously. But one thing does end up happening. Age of Ultron. And that's where we're going to leave things off for right now. If you guys enjoyed this, I really hope you enjoyed this. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and I felt like waiting until Endgame was over to see how everything would work out. And yeah, I honestly wanted to end this off like after Age of Ultron, but with all the exposition and everything, it ended up being a bit longer than I thought it would. So I had to cut it off at here. A lot of you might be wondering why I ended up having Cap be the Avenger that finds Ben, and I figured it'd be a good fit other than Iron Man or Thor. Like Thor would end up doing his own thing, go off to Thor: The Dark World. Iron Man would be off doing his own thing. I figured Cap would be the most likely hero to be going around the countryside trying to get rid of Hydra and help get some of the shield bases back up and running, since he was the one who ended up fighting the whole Hydra thing in the first place. But yeah, I'm going to leave things off at there, with Ben having 13 of his aliens, as well as being more mature and more used to these new powers. This ended up being a lot longer, and I'm really sorry. The next video will not be as long. I'm gonna make the next video a lot quicker. I promise you that. Hope you guys have an awesome day, and I really hope you guys give me some great ideas for other what if videos. I'm gonna be doing a lot of these in the future. All right, see you.